We are here at the EAGE conference in Aberdeen. It's returned, or first time here, I should say.
First time ever in
here.
Aberdeen.
Now, we've been speaking to quite a lot of the delegates from the show floor before the conference started even. But before we get into that, Erikka, who have you been speaking to?
Well, while EAGE was on, there was also in Aberdeen the launch of the State of the Nation report by Powerful Women. So I went along to that, and we sat down, a quick interview with Georgina Worrell, who's the head of Powerful Women. I say in the podcast, actually, she's the founder, but that's Baroness Pharma. So I had to correct that, but we sat down with her, Catherine Descott, who's a Powerful Woman ambassador, and Donna Sutherland from Very, who's also with Scottish Energy Forum, who were big supporters of the report. So stay tuned. There's, guess what? Nothing's really changed.
Shock horror.
Hi, it's Erikka here at bubbly Marcliffe. You can probably hear some really great discussions going on in the background. I'm here with Catherine Descott, who's the head of Powerful Women in Scotland, and Donna Sutherland, who is with Very Energy, but she's a well-known face and voice for Energy Voice Out Loud listeners. And you are Scottish Energy Forum chair, and you have supported this research and this event. So give us a little bit of a rundown about what the Powerful Women report has just said, and why is it not changing? I'm frustrated. Are you?
Firstly, the numbers are still fairly poor. But let's focus on the positive. Since 2015, there's been huge progress made if we actually focus on when this report started to where we are now in 2026. I think the reflection, though, of what the report outcome this year was very much around elements of it stagnating, some regression, but some very just incremental change. And when you're only so many years away from that target of 40% representation in senior leadership positions, it's very clear that there needs to be a gigantic effort to actually get to the targets that's been set by Powerful Women. I think in the room today we heard some really brilliant practical advice and suggestions about how to actually step up rather than stepping back to ensure that we actually deliver success.
Yeah.
And I think for me that those reflections by the panel today were fantastic, and I think this was brilliantly moderated by Catherine. So I think you could highlight and allow those in the podcast to understand more about what was said in the room.
I'll start with the good.
There we go. Absolutely.
So an increase in board and women in board at board levels or on boards and also in leadership is something to celebrate, and I think that's progress. It's not all doom and gloom. However, there is still 78% of companies that do not have a female CEO nor a CFO in their exec team, which is pretty depressing. I think we are stagnating. I think where the issue is, and it's becoming really clear, is that in the middle management level, we have stagnated or we're stalling. And that is our pipeline for feeding leadership positions. And so the question is, what are we doing about the middle management 40% by 2030 target? It concerns me. I think listening to the panel today, there are some clear practical steps we heard about sponsorship and the power of sponsorship that can have on individuals in their career. Women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. So I think that's an area that I think we need to support women, and support is one of the 3 pillars of what Powerful Women do in the industry to support women and the target of 40% women in leadership by 2030. I think the other interesting, what I really liked was that someone said in the room, instead of women going on courses and training and being told to be more like men, why don't we ask men to be more like women? And I think that's a really interesting flip, of the paradigm that I've heard today, and I think one of the concerning points that Paul Deleu raised, because he's got the data, he's got the knowledge and the evidence, is that there are jobs out there. I mean, we've never invested as much in money and capital in energy as we are today, but yet why are all the jobs that are in energy not in the 60-mile radius of Aberdeen? That is a question that really concerns me. And I think that's where it's interesting to talk about the policy of remote working, flexible working, how that works, how that fits in. And then lastly, what really struck me is that we had, I think, a reduction in the number of men attending today, and that was a shame. I think my call to everyone in the room is bring a +1. I brought my husband today, so Guillaume, he came from Shell and represented Shell here today, but is everyone else not doing that? Why are we not bringing our sons? Why are not we bringing our daughters? Why are we not inviting the schools and NESCOL, especially because the vocational skills are the future workforce skills that this industry will be built on? Why are we not inviting them to the table in the conversation?
Very good. Well, I want to thank you, Catherine, because of course you're kind of taking powerful women on tour to the Women in New Energy conference in June on the 23rd. And as you're saying, we have some early stage career and school people coming, which is really exciting. Although I'm not bringing my husband. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, I kind of feel like I'm missing a trick here. So, right. Okay. No, I'm definitely going to add that. Just because I think I was really struck by your point about sponsorship versus mentorship, because that's not just the someone telling me how to act, or act like more like a man, or going to be more something. It is kind of saying, no, you are a leader and you need to go out and lead. And why doesn't that happen more? And how do we enable that? How do we encourage that? Do we just name it and encourage it?
Yeah, I think it doesn't happen more because I don't think it's people see the value in it. If I'm honest, I completely agree with you about the sponsorship aspect. It was really interesting to hear Martha and her comment about the fact that she was sponsored but she didn't even know it.
Yeah.
That she was given a place at the table, but she felt. She never used the word intimidated, but she didn't even use that opportunity to actually, have her voice heard. And I think my reflection of the key practical aspects of it and the value of sponsorship was strongly linked to value, and actually being given a place at the table, which is that enabling. It's about stepping up, not stepping back. And it was Jeannie's analogy around the example she used about the female individual at a senior executive meeting, and why she kept giving her male colleagues a seat at the table even though they were the same level as her. And I remember reading the book Nice Girls Don't Get Put in the Corner Office. And it's about how you are actually brought up and you're mentoring from your mum. And it's around females it's entrained in us at a very young age to be respectful to, there's just a different cultural upbringing of females and males. And it's actually through that sponsorship, that senior leadership and that experience can actually reteach that cultural expectation where, women deserve the seat at the table, that positive sponsorship actually can lead to being able to bridge that gap and get us to that level and reverse the trend to the 78%, no senior or female representation at board CEO or CFO level. So it's all of these practical, value opportunities that need to come forward in organisations across the sector.
Yeah.
I think the thing with sponsorship, I would just point out, it doesn't happen overnight. And it is something that evolves and builds and develops in time. And because being a sponsor is a bit of a risky business, you're willing to stick your neck out on the line behind closed doors for someone who's not in the room. That comes from trust, it comes from delivery, it comes from performing, and all of these factors contribute to someone evolving into being a sponsor. I mean, my mum, speaking of mums, my mum introduced me to my sponsor, but at the time I had no, actually I've got 3 sponsors. At the time I had no idea, and they're all they've all been outside of my company, bar one. So my mom introduced me to a lady called Jacqueline Craw when she worked with Jacqueline, and Jacqueline continued to take, when I was at university, and she continued to take an interest in my career. I would stop in past every time I was back home in Aberdeen. And over time, she was my mentor, and then she slowly became my sponsor. And I think it's important to say that that's a cultivation, that's a period of time. So my suggestion to those out there going, oh, who's my sponsor? How do I get a sponsor? Have a think about who is your mentor. I mean, mentors can evolve into sponsors as well, but have a think about who you have built a relationship with, a track record with, and have a think about, and if they're not already sponsoring you, and if you don't know it, find out and ask.
And make it formal. Yeah.
Yeah, and formalize.
Right. Absolutely. Great. No, good. Look, now we're just about at the end of time, and I thank you both for your time. But just maybe remind us, and it sounds very obvious, why does this matter? Why do women in energy matter?
Great question.
Yes, and we'll hand over to Georgina for that one.
Very
Why does it
good.
matter, Georgina,
Very
you have
good.
female representation in senior positions?
Because I think it comes back to the conversations that we've had around diversity of thought. I think when you've got a sea of men, and back to the comment that was made today about the USA-China conversation, that photograph, which was an all-male room, really resonated with me as a big kind of warning sign, because that is men making decisions and not bringing in the female thought process, the female voice, the female experience. And so decisions get made with men going, oh, yeah, that's really great, rather than actually thinking, is this great for everybody?
Yep.
And so that's why I think it is so important to have diverse leadership teams.
Yeah, good. So we've just been, photobombed by Georgina Worrell, OBE, who is the founder of Powerful Women, and she's up in Aberdeen. Absolutely wonderful to see you, Georgina. You know what, actually, you also set out what we need to do to kind of solve this. You know, there's a 5-point plan. It looked really simple, but is it? Just maybe run through what those answers were to encouraging more women into the industry.
So I'm going to pick the most important one for me, and it's back to tracking your P&L levels, because that is where your future CEO is predominantly going to come from, those roles. I think we can look at statistics and think we're doing really well on gender representation within the sector, but you're quite often pulling those P&L roles in with the support roles as well. So actually, if you differentiate between taking out the support roles and just looking at those P&L roles, you'll probably find that's where the fall off is. And we've seen that within the report. We've seen the fall off at COO and CFO level, and that's predominantly where that CEO promotion will come from. So it is tracking your P&L levels and making sure that you've got robust succession plans of how you are going to bring the women in when those opportunities at P&L level become available.
Good. And how do we make that happen? We just make sure that we're keeping on top of the number of people that are coming to that table, basically.
So it's twofold. One is actually tracking at that level, and it's also having robust succession plans and how you're going to develop that person. And one of the panelists made it, how do you develop the women of today, and how do you develop the women of the future who could move into those roles?
I think, how do we actually get it done? I think, so Powerful Women is made up of a board of Energy Leaders Coalition members, and they are energy companies from the industry, and they are responsible for setting direction and supporting and taking it back into their own companies. And all of the Energy Leaders Coalition members are listed in the in the powerful and ranked in the Powerful Women Annual State of the Nation report. So if you go on, everyone go on online and have a read, and you can see all the Energy Leader Coalition companies, and they are responsible for taking it back in. But not just the leaders, we are all leaders in this sense. So every one of us reading that report needs to go back and take it to their companies and ask the challenging questions.
Right. Well, that's been an absolutely amazing morning. Thank you so much, Catherine, Donna, Georgina. It's been wonderful. Thank you for joining us, and keep up the good fight. Next up, Ryan actually was able to find out what is going on with the North Sea Transition Authority, what they really think about maximizing economic recovery. And what did they say?
Yeah, it was interesting. I spoke to Andy Brooks, which is the New Ventures Director at the regulator, and we were chatting a little bit after his panel session where he was potentially sparring, verbally sparring with Doris Reiter, the North Sea boss at BP, a little bit. She was sort of questioning the NSTA's homework about how much oil we can actually get out of the ground in the UK, quoting OEUK figures and OEUK analysis. So that was quite interesting. I put that to him. And we also discussed the future of the North Sea with CCS and what transitional energy certificates are actually going to be, which I think that'll have a big impact on what we're going to see in the North Sea over the next few years. So enough of us waffling on. We might as well hear what he has to say.
So is it just a matter of whether or not there's a few 100 million barrels more or less between the regulator and industry? I mean, hey, it's just between friends, right?
Yeah, what's a few 100 million and pounds and barrels between friends?
Right.
But yeah, Andy will talk us all through that, so let's hear what he had to say. We're here at the AEGE conference in Aberdeen. I'm here with Andy Brooks from the NSTA. How are you doing today, Andy?
It's great, yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it?
It is, it's really good. And do you know what? I've just heard you on that panel session on the show floor, which is maybe a bit unique for some of the conferences here in Aberdeen. We're used to peeling off into meeting rooms. You were right in the heart of the show floor.
Yep.
Had some really interesting things to say. I was really interested in, well, the CCS stuff, but we're going to get to that. I want to speak about oil and gas right now, if that's all right with you.
Okay.
We're speaking about techs, we were speaking about the future of new developments, and you said something quite interesting, which I think is maybe a slightly misunderstanding that's been created in the UK with its oil and gas sector, which is you're not saying no to new infrastructure. And I thought, well, hold on a minute. Aren't techs saying no to new infrastructure? I'd be interested to hear what you mean about that.
Yeah, so obviously the preference would be to maximise the use of existing infrastructure, but we recognise that under existing licences there are areas where that infrastructure perhaps doesn't exist. That doesn't mean to say that that whatever infrastructure is built doesn't need to be cleaner, as clean as it can be, so like electrification from shore or partnering with a CCS store, all that sort of stuff. But ultimately it has to work with the infrastructure that's around it. It has to work through the consenting process as other things, as everything has to do. But we're not saying no, because there is going to be activity on existing licenses. Techs will play a part when they come in. They will be they're designed to look at areas around existing infrastructure to enable those sort of tiebacks. But there's many opportunities within existing licenses that it may be sensible to put new infrastructure out there. But what we've said for a number of years now is that our preference is to maximise the use of existing infrastructure above putting new infrastructure out there.
Yeah, and you pointed to the 33rd round as an example of that direction towards near field tiebacks as opposed to new frontiers, as it was put. With that, does that mean that techs is maybe we're seeing a lot of talk about techs almost feeling like it's an overhaul in how we're looking at oil and gas? Is that maybe something that's just been secretly the direction of travel for the NSTA for some time?
I don't think it's a secret. I think we've certainly since I've been there, I've been in the NSTA for 5 years. I think our preference has been over that time to look at why wouldn't you want to maximise the use of your existing infrastructure? It allows for investment in the core assets. It allows for us to look at rationalising some of the infrastructure, like the big pipeline areas, and it maximises the longevity of them, which not only means that you can bring those new reserves in, but you can put investment into that existing infrastructure in terms of the legacy, the latent reserves, and indeed you can invest in things like emissions reduction and all that sort of stuff. We know that emissions reduction on brownfield assets is expensive, so you want to try and core up around specific areas to drive that investment. So I don't think it's anything necessarily new that we haven't been focusing on before. I think what TECs will allow is that they will allow some sensible approaches around that existing infrastructure, and it just makes it more formalised. It's akin to a kind of second term license where there's something that's known, that's perhaps understood, that has maybe been relinquished in the past, or a discovery is partly on a license and partly not on a license, all that sort of stuff. That's what TECs are going to be there for. But we're still working through the details of it, right? The North Sea Future Plan has only been out there for not too long. We need to see how that plays out through Parliament in the Energy Independence Bill, and we're working on what TECs might look like, the process of what we might need to do in order to be able to issue them. But that will be a little while yet. But what we do know is that there's plenty of opportunity in existing licences. So we estimate that about 80% of the reserves left in the North Sea are already licensed areas. So you can go and explore in those areas, you can develop them, and you can do so without the need for TECs. So TECs will be important, but I think there's still plenty of opportunity out there in the existing licences.
It's interesting you point to your data and that 80% is already allocated, and you spoke on the panel about the opportunity for investment and production in the UK right now. And Doris Reiter, BP's the sort of head of North Sea, was maybe challenging the maths of the regulator a little bit, pointing to OEUK's figures, right, and saying, well, you're not quite right. We could deliver more investment. When it comes to that disparity, is this a case of OEUK being optimistic and saying in a perfect scenario where investment conditions were exactly right, this is what we could deliver, and the NSTA is being more realistic? Or how do you see that disparity forming?
I think Doris and I mean, I've known Doris for a while. I think Doris and I were actually more aligned than perhaps it came across. I think that the base data is the same. We're all looking at the same core data. Most of it's actually our data that we collect through the stewardship survey. I think you're absolutely right. We take a slightly more, I wouldn't even say pessimistic, and wouldn't even say realistic. It's just a view that we take that there are 3.3 billion barrels out there that can be readily available and readily produced that we expect to see. The OEUK numbers and the numbers that the industry seems to want to put out are more optimistic, and maybe you're right. They're looking at, in the perfect scenario with the perfect fiscal regime, that there's more. But great, brilliant. Like, if there's more opportunity out there, we're all for it. But as I say, I think the base data is the same. How you choose to interpret it, where you draw the line on what's probable and what's not, then that's where the difference comes from. But I think actually what Doris and Total Energies were also saying was very much aligned with what we've been talking about in terms of maximising the use of existing infrastructure, investment in that, and then into the new energy technologies. And we need to see collaboration and cooperation across everything, industry, regulator, everything, to make that, unlock that. And that's what they were saying. That's what I heard anyway.
And I'm glad you mentioned Total and BP, and you're speaking about new technologies. CCS was a massive point there. Northern Endurance Partnership, 2 of the 3 members are on stage with you, looking at that sort of crossover between oil and gas, CCS, wind, and so many other things. We saw Aberdeen University release a report recently that said we need to come up with a way to co-locate properly. I'm sure you read that report. I'm sure you're aware. How do you see that co-location? When I say problem, you might say opportunity. I don't know. Going forward, how does the NSTA, as the regulator, ensure that this menagerie of opportunity is delivered in the most sensible way?
Well, I think firstly, it's great that there is so much opportunity out there, right? That there is so much work that can be done across all different energy vectors. So that's brilliant that the UK has got such a rich opportunity across different areas. That's a positive, right? Where it comes down to in terms of how you work that spatial coordination, spatial planning, is it has to come down to early engagement. So as I said on the panel, we work very closely with Crown Estate Scotland to try and avoid where there is some overlap. There'll be many occasions where that can't happen. but then we expect operators to collaborate across different vectors, to collaborate together. There are many instances across the North Sea where wind and oil and gas or wind and carbon storage licenses are overlapping, and it just needs everyone to work for that common goal. Yes, there will obviously be situations where one has to take preference over the other, maybe in the short term, but that doesn't mean to say that things can't coexist, and we firmly believe that they can. There may be some technology gaps. I mentioned on the panel around how do you monitor a carbon store if there's a wind farm sitting over the top of it. Those are things that are totally, well, we understand what the issues are and what the potential problems are, and we need to work together, both us and the operators and academia and everyone out there, to unlock that potential, because the potential is huge, and we just need to make sure that we work together for the great good. But at the end of the day, someone will have to go first, and we just need to make sure that we are all understanding which one takes preference.
Well, see, that's the thing. So how does the UK as a whole, for want of a better term, pick the winner, right? If there is a wind turbine that's meant to be directly over a reservoir that's going to be used for CCS or an oil and gas tieback, how do you across the regulators, across the Crown Estate Scotland, the Crown Estate, so on and so forth, say, well, actually, that CCS project should get precedent over that wind turbine, or vice versa? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think it's an ever-evolving picture, right? So there's no one right or wrong answer. I think it does come down to us talking to each other. So we've worked very closely with the Crown Estate on a shared evidence base, so providing our data into where we see opportunities both for oil and gas and for CCS. They've done the same with their wind, and they've produced a set of maps that show where the areas of search for different energy. It's not saying one should necessarily take precedence over the other, but it's giving an indication, some visibility to across the different operators, and indeed in the external world, of where we believe the most likely areas of search for different things may be. And as we see things progress through time, things can change, right? CCS could build out much faster than we think, in which case perhaps CCS needs to take more of a preference if it builds in a certain way. But I think that will just take time to work out. We're only in the second carbon storage licensing round right now. We're going to assess that. We're doing exactly the same thing that we've done before, and talking to all those different regulators. And we will, as I say, try and trim areas where it makes sense to try and avoid those situations. We don't know how hydrogen is going to play out. We don't know how floating offshore wind is going to play out in the future. So there's a lot of work to be done, but there's a real desire and want and need, actually. There's an acceptance across the different regulators that we have to work together to make sure that we unlock as much potential as we can. And then we expect, where there is going to be overlap, because there will be, we expect operators across the different energy systems to work together to make sure that things can coexist and they can't designed in parallel. So it's a complicated picture. I'm not really answering your question, but it's a complicated picture, and as industries play out, we'll see that developing as we go.
And you touch on the second round. You said on the stage there that we'll see the winners of that either late 26 or early 27.
In that region, yeah.
Can I hold you to a date?
No. I suspect it will be late 26 into early 27. The round is closed. We're currently going through the assessment of those. I haven't seen many of the data yet because my team's working on it. So there are a few other things that need to play out before we can actually make awards. But I suspect you can certainly hold me to roughly the first quarter of 2027, I would suggest at the latest. There's a couple other things that need to work in parallel with what we're doing before we can award licenses, but I suspect it'll be in that region. And there's some really interesting areas. I haven't seen much of the detail, but there is some really interesting areas that have been bid on, and we're really excited about the opportunity to look at that and then hopefully make some awards when the time comes.
So from the NSTA maybe having a little bit of a sparring match with Doris, to you speaking to BP just before the show started, tell me what's going on.
Right. Well, you'll see that actually BP is kind of a big sponsor of this show. They've been getting a little ribbing while they were here because they're one of the last big North Sea operators, or are they?
Oh,
However, I spoke to Ariel Flores, who's BP's Senior Vice President of Subsurface, and he told me that why this show, as we know, first time it's been in Aberdeen, had to come to Aberdeen when it came to the UK. And it was great. Listen in. Here we are at the 87th EAGE conference. It's the first time in Aberdeen. Tell us about your involvement. Why are you here?
I know, Erikka, you and I met a few years back when I was here running our North Sea operations. And it's always had a special place in my heart. Got nice friends. I worked here for a number of years. And when the opportunity presented itself, I was quite keen. We contemplated a few other cities in the UK. And I immediately said, look, we have to come to Aberdeen. Aberdeen has been such a part of the oil and gas journey, not only for the UK, the northeast of Scotland, but for the world. Capability has been born in many ways out of Aberdeen and deployed all over the world to make great things happen. So I thought, what better location than Aberdeen? And because, in essence, EAGE is scientists and engineers, it's a wonderful opportunity to bring people together from around the world to talk about science and technology.
I, for one, am amazed by the scope. I mean, the buzz already is pretty intense. Who knew that thousands, tens of thousands of people would be coming here? Looks like a great success so far. But what themes and topics are you expecting to be emergent? You were talking about how AI is going to change everything, but also you were talking about how technology has changed so dramatically, just even the few years you've been away doing other things around the world for BP. That things are now possible because of technology that we couldn't have done even just, 2-3 years ago.
That's correct.
That's amazing. So this is going to be a big theme.
It really is. And as I described, I think we are on the brink of a real revolution. You're seeing us do things we couldn't do 4 years ago. The advent of GPUs allows us to bring data that's always existed, but actually get it to work for us, get it to converge. And that data is now lighting things up in the subsurface. It's actually looking at correlations in data much quicker and more capable than the human brain, and it's bringing these correlations to practitioners that can employ judgment. And this is what I described as my ear getting bent over the years around the fact that our very capable individuals spent a disproportionate amount of time just getting data, getting the data organized. And I think that's what's going to be very much accelerated. That's going to allow us to make better decisions quicker and faster, more comprehensively than ever before.
Sure. So geologists, AI will allow geologists to be geologists again, maybe.
It will.
Okay,
It will.
that's cool.
And you always need, imagine what they do. They see things that occurred 100, 150 million years ago, when of course they really can't see it. They envision this and they allow the data to come together to inform us, because it's their description that allows us to tap into the potential. So you can imagine that in the absence of seeing the world as it was 150 million years ago, we have very little. And that's where I think data being in front of them will allow them to see things we haven't been able to see before.
Wow, cool. Very impressive. So now, this is an opportunity for you to be back in Aberdeen. You've led the North Sea business. And taking on your current role as head of subsurface, we maybe, we kind of maybe touched on, kind of what we could do now that we couldn't do then. But what else are you thinking? I mean, the woman that you were speaking to on stage was saying, is the North Sea dying? And then she said, well, no, it's not. And then you said, no, it's not.
Yes, there is a lot of oil and gas out in the North Sea. Dr. Underhill, of course, described the continental shelf. There's actually around the greater UK number of basins and a lot of potential left. So then the question becomes, well, Ariel, then what's it going to take? Well, it always starts with people. It's going to take real capability. It's going to take the ability to describe the prize. I talked about going around different countries. And it starts with describing that potential. And we can absolutely do that. We can describe what it means for energy, for growth in the economy, for job creation, because we've done it time and time again. And so I think as we move forward, we're absolutely going to be in that situation where we'll explain to decision makers what the growth potential is. It's going to allow for data centers and AI to be unlocked in this country. And it's going to provide for a more resilient opportunity to create a new outlook of sorts. And I think that's what we know will happen because, basins get developed over decades. Energy outlooks have to be 25, 50, 100 years. And yes, we have to be thinking about what will occur in 50 years, which includes all kinds of energy. But we have to ensure that tomorrow, everyone's just a little bit better than yesterday. And I think that's what's going to allow for things to move at a pace that I think most people will expect.
Sure, sure. One of the things you talked on, and you're working all over the world. You said you were just in Azerbaijan. I presume that you were also recently been, and maybe what's going on in Brazil. Lots of exciting things for VP. There's, you're saying that, it almost doesn't matter kind of what the regime is like. Whenever you're working around the world, it doesn't really matter. It just as long as it's stable. And are you finding that there are basins that are hungry to kind of meet the demand that still exists for oil and gas, and that's where you're finding, some real opportunity?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I always believe, countries, stakeholders, national oil companies, it's their choice. It's their choice, and what they want to do is absolutely what they should do. But in the global landscape, that provides a company like ours choice, and we can decide based on our priorities what we would like to get involved with. And as long as it stays stable, it's something that we can quantify, and then we can stack up equitably around the world. And so I often describe any stakeholder that stability is key. Just stick to it, and it's absolutely fine. We can make our decisions. And so I do believe that in the search for energy security, resilience, a long-term outlook of energy supply, you are seeing countries that want to unlock their potential. And in that, there's opportunities. And there is a competitive landscape that's being created. And you start seeing countries announce new lease rounds, changing their terms, looking to neighboring countries and trying to figure out why they're not quite as competitive. And that's all good, right? Competition is the key to getting a better outcome, both in the private sector and in the public sector. And I think those are all excellent things. And that's where I also see opportunities. You can create new relationships. Countries that maybe felt, for whatever reason, didn't have a voice, now have a voice. And you can work based on our track record as a company and working with everyone to try to fortify these new opportunities and new relationships.
What's down there that's genuinely exciting? That really kind of made you go, wow. Is it just the AI that's being transformational, or is there other things as well that is really kind of geeky and cool?
Well, there's a lot of geeky and cool stuff I can pick on. But look, I'll pick on two things that really, really does excite me. You mentioned Brazil, and that's our biggest discovery in 25 years. And that discovery was Shah Deniz, big gas field in the Caspian. With that gas field, we built a pipeline that transports gas all the way to Europe.
Handy in this day and age.
Very, very handy. Turkey and other countries have benefited from the supply of gas that now will be and has been multi-decade, created massive amounts of job growth and GDP across Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan, but also Italy and every country and company that's been supplied. And that's what a material discovery does. And so in Brazil, with the 8 billion barrels that we've discovered, it'll be the same. Generations will benefit This development will see decades of activity, create all kinds of opportunity for supply chain, but also help Brazil in their ambitions to grow and to diversify their economy. So when you're able to find things like that, it's pretty exciting because there's not a lot of things you can do that create that amount of impact to societies and to generations. The geeky stuff, as I described, imagine trying to get a limp piece of spaghetti from one end of your bathtub down to the drain and hit it every time. And that's what steel behaves when we're trying to drill into the vast depths of the world. And it wants to go everywhere, but where you need it to go. And we get that steel to go where it needs to go safely, and it hits our targets every time. And to have all the technologies, much of it you'll see in this conference, to underpin doing that is quite remarkable.
So that does it from us at the EAGE conference here in Aberdeen. What a week it's been. And you know what? There's been a good few stands dishing out the coffee. I think I need this now.
You know what? I think there's some damn fine coffee here, as well as lots of rock stars.
Oh, there we go. We needed to get a
I
rock
needed to
pun
do
in
it
there.
there.
You know what? You're bolder than I.